Did you know that the price of a Big Mac combo has increased by nearly 70% over the past 5 years? In many major cities, it now costs more than $10. At the same time, McDonald's just reported its lowest quarterly revenue in 4 years. In the third quarter of 2024, McDonald's global revenue fell by 1.5%, a red flag for a company that once enjoyed steady growth. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, the price of a Big Mac combo rose from $6 in 2018 to over $10 today, nearly a 70% increase. For a family of 4, a meal at McDonald's can now cost around $35, roughly the same as eating at a sit-down restaurant. Meanwhile, minimum wages in states such as California and New York hover around $15 per hour. That means an employee has to work close to 1 hour just to afford a single McDonald's meal. These figures aren't just about economics, they directly impact the spending habits of millions of Americans, especially students and blue-collar workers. It forces them to think twice before stepping into the golden arches. McDonald's once proud $1 menu has shrunk significantly, now offering only a few small items like cookies or black coffee for $1. Portion sizes have shrunk too. Fries are about 15% smaller compared to a few years ago, yet prices rise approximately 8% every year. Customers feel they're getting less for more money, and that's damaging loyalty. Meanwhile, competitors such as Sheetz and Wawa attract customers by offering fresher, made-to-order meals at prices 10 to 20% lower than McDonald's. Consumers increasingly compare and seek real value, putting McDonald's in a tough position. This growing gap between price and perceived value is pushing many longtime customers to reconsider their options. Social media and review platforms amplify these frustrations, spreading negative word of mouth quickly. As a result, McDonald's faces an uphill battle to retain its loyal customer base in an increasingly competitive market. Surveys indicate 78% of millennials and Gen Z shoppers carefully check ingredients before buying food, yet only about 5% of McDonald's menu items are fresh. Meanwhile, organic and plant-based food markets are growing over 20% annually. Though McDonald's removed artificial preservatives from its chicken nuggets back in 2016 and improved bread ingredients, these efforts lag behind competitors. The McPlant burger, introduced in 2022, remains limited in availability, missing a big opportunity to capture vegetarian and flexitarian consumers. Highly processed foods with long, complicated ingredient lists raise skepticism among younger customers, damaging McDonald's reputation among modern consumers. Drive-through wait times have nearly doubled, from 3.2 minutes in 2019 to 6.1 minutes in 2025. Even more concerning, 25% of orders are delivered incorrectly. Missing items or containing errors, according to J.D. Power's latest survey. The McDonald's mobile app causes frustration with frequent crashes, GPS glitches, and promo codes often not working, dragging its rating down to about 3 stars. Self-service kiosks inside stores also pose problems, especially for elderly customers and people with disabilities. This results in a less user-friendly experience, a major drawback in today's tech-driven world. According to a recent Consumer Reports survey, over 60% of customers are unhappy with McDonald's restaurant design. Cold, rigid seating, absence of music, and lack of play areas for children have diminished the brand's once warm and inviting atmosphere. Traditional bright red and yellow colors have been replaced by muted gray tones, stripping away the coziness and friendliness that defined McDonald's for decades. Cleanliness is another critical issue. 40% of surveyed locations scored poorly on hygiene: dirty tables, overflowing trash bins, and inadequate restrooms. Staff members are often overworked and stressed, negatively impacting service quality and customer satisfaction.
Import tariffs from China have tripled, from 54% to 145%. And while Beijing calls for an emergency UN meeting, India quietly turns away and shakes hands with Washington, a deal that changes the game. Just days after the US-India trade deal was announced, India made 2 major moves: increase imports from the United States, decrease imports from China. And to raise the stakes even higher, India immediately slapped a 12% tariff on Chinese steel. A move aimed at blocking the dumping practices that Beijing has backed for years. Behind these numbers lies a deeper reality. China is steadily losing its closest trade partners. And the United States, through proactive trade strategies, is gradually isolating the world's second largest economy. Why is this US-India deal causing such a stir? Because it's not just about goods. It's a clear signal that India has chosen its side in the largest trade conflict on the planet. America's encirclement strategy. When the 47th president enacted a wave of new tariffs, the target wasn't just goods labeled Made in China. The real issue: many Chinese products are being relabeled, passing through Vietnam, Mexico, or Cambodia before reaching the US. To counter this tactic, Washington issued a blunt ultimatum. Any country wishing to trade with the United States must commit to not assisting China. The result? South Korea recently caught a Chinese firm violating country of origin labeling rules. And the US demanded strict enforcement. This is a new phase, tougher and more systematic, as the White House targets not only the goods, but the entire global distribution network controlled by Beijing. China's counteroffensive falls. Flat-facing mounting pressure, China switched to diplomatic aggression. Beijing accused the US of weaponizing tariffs at an informal UN meeting. A letter was sent to 193 member states, denouncing the US for disrupting the global trade order. But the irony is hard to ignore. China itself is facing silent rejection from countries once considered close allies. An unrefusable offer inviting India to Beijing? Modi did not respond. A call for alliance with South Korea and Japan to oppose the US? Both rejected the invitation. Friendly visits to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia? Just after leaving Vietnam, the country announced a purchase of 26 F-16 fighter jets from Washington. Beijing's campaign for new allies is turning into a string of failures, not only because of its lack of sincerity, but because the carrot and stick strategy no longer works. Chinese steel, the fuse of a new war? Why did India choose steel as the first target of its tariffs? Because steel isn't just a strategic commodity. It's China's main tool to undermine the industries of other nations. Beijing's model is crystal clear. Subsidize domestic steelmakers. Expand production beyond internal demand. Export at below-cost prices, forcing rivals to collapse. When local businesses can no longer compete, factories shut down. And when conflict arises, those nations lose the ability to produce critical materials. Steel, in the eyes of many governments, is more than economics. It's a national security issue. The UK, the US, and now India all chose to build walls against China's steel inflow, because an industry that can't recover means a nation that cannot defend itself. $14 billion in just 72 hours. Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But that's the price tag the US soybean export industry lost due to a single remark from Donald Trump. Was this the cost of a negotiation strategy or just another reckless political stunt? Donald Trump has reignited the idea of making Canada the 51st state of the US, claiming it would benefit Canadians with lower taxes, military protection, and health care. But here's the big question. Would Canadians be willing to trade their self-determination for a US-based welfare system? Immediately, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau slammed the idea, reaffirming that Canada is an independent nation and will protect its sovereignty. His strong response sparked a wave of national unity. Millions of Canadians took to the streets, and social media erupted with messages like, "Number Canada is not for sale." But the question remains, can this neighborly relationship survive such a divisive statement from Trump? Is this just political posturing, or is it something more? Trump's words weren't just political banter. They hit a nerve with Canadians. Protests erupted in major cities like Ottawa and Toronto, where citizens expressed deep concern about losing their unique cultural identity. from hockey festivals to the multicultural values that have been cultivated over decades. But the social unrest didn't stop at protests. It began to affect daily life. In provinces like Ontario, where the automobile industry has strong economic ties with the US, workers and businesses feared the worst. If tensions continue to escalate, they could lose critical job opportunities. Even in the US, border communities like Buffalo, New York, are now facing the prospect of rising living costs, especially as goods from Canada may soon face higher tariffs. So, it begs the question, can people on both sides of the border weather this storm? Canada is a crucial economic partner for the US, supplying 60% of the crude oil and 85% of electricity to states like Michigan and New York. The trade relationship is worth over $1.2 trillion annually, supporting millions of jobs across both nations. But if trade tensions continue to rise, the economic consequences will be far-reaching. A disruption in Canada's oil supply would send gasoline prices soaring in the US, raising transportation costs and food prices, putting pressure on the middle class, and fueling inflation. In Canada, key industries like oil in Alberta and automotive in Ontario could lose billions in revenue, threatening the livelihoods of thousands of workers. This situation isn't just a minor hiccup, it's a major challenge for both economies. Don't get me wrong, Trump's remarks aren't just idle chatter. They're shaking the foundation of US-Canada relations. Economically, any disruption in the USMCA agreement could have a domino effect, causing prices to rise and jobs to be lost. Socially, the notion of a 51st state is sowing division among Canadians, from the country's Indigenous communities to American families who rely on affordable goods. Trump might see this as a negotiating tactic, but the cost may be a loss of trust with a key ally. Canada is a key partner for the US in NATO and the G7, but does America realize that a strong neighbor is more valuable than just adding another state? The future of millions of people now hangs in the balance. And if we're not careful, everything could come crashing down.
Ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America.
In just 24 hours, China slapped a 125% tariff on American goods, canceled a $400 million Boeing contract, and caused the U.S. luxury market to lose billions in value. What happens when a politician slips with words, and the global economy pays the price? Is this the perfect example of the phrase, open mouth, insert foot, that Americans often joke about? Recently, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance referred to Chinese workers as peasants. Though perhaps meant as a colloquial phrase, Beijing took this as a direct insult to their labor force, a group China holds as a pillar of its national growth. But the response was not just words or media statements. It came in the form of hard policy. China imposed a 125% tariff on U.S. goods, with no prior warning. They canceled Boeing orders worth $400 million, a heavy blow to America's aviation industry. And they halted all mail and cargo shipments from Hong Kong to the U.S., causing supply chain blockages. China's swift, decisive, and uncompromising moves show they are not just defending pride, but using the incident to reassert their position in the simmering trade war. Right after China's tariff retaliation, Chinese consumers responded with their wallets. This battleground wasn't in agriculture or technology, but in luxury goods. Gucci saw a 30% drop in market value in the first quarter alone. LVMH lost over 2% in market cap overnight as sales stalled in Asia. High-end stores in Shanghai and Beijing, once bustling with thousands daily, are now unusually empty. On Chinese social media, Western brands are labeled betrayal brands. Shopping stopped being personal. It became a collective statement. Rather than taxing individual products, China succeeded in weaponizing consumer emotion. a soft but extremely powerful tool. While policymakers debate tariffs' pros and cons, Americans see the impact firsthand. Food, household goods, and electronics prices have risen significantly in recent quarters. Walmart warned it can't hold prices forever amid rising import costs. Some imported medicines, like ibuprofen, are becoming scarce due to supply disruptions from China. A survey by Allianz found nearly 60% of Americans believe the trade war is harming more than helping. The impact isn't limited to domestic markets. The U.S. faces subtle shifts from international partners. India remains cautious, refraining from openly supporting either side, instead focusing on strengthening bilateral relations with both. The European Union threatens retaliatory tariffs worth €95 billion if the U.S. escalates tariffs unilaterally. Canada quietly raised tariffs by 25% on American cars and is pushing trade talks with the EU. Meanwhile, China pursues a different path, restructuring supply chains, focusing on domestic market growth, encouraging citizens to buy local instead of foreign brands. And most importantly, China doesn't just talk policy, it shapes global policy through consumer behavior. After intense pressure from businesses, markets, and public opinion, both sides agreed to cool down. The U.S. cut tariffs from 145% to 30%. China lowered its tariffs from 125% to 10%. The bigger questions remain. Supply chains are broken. Who will rebuild them? Trade trust is damaged. Who will restore it? Tariffs can change, but markets have adapted, consumers have shifted, and partners are charting their own courses. Reducing tariffs is necessary, but restoring trust requires more than a decree. It demands a long-term strategy. They're investing close to $1 billion and adding 5,000 new jobs in 2025. This move shatters rumors about plant closures and offshoring. So, what's driving GE to double down on U.S. production right now? Yes, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and components have raised costs by roughly 15 to 20%. But GE Aerospace is investing nearly $1 billion to modernize its U.S. facilities. How? By using automation, streamlining supply chains, and leveraging government support programs. More than that, the Made in America label is a strategic asset, safeguarding GE's global reputation and competitiveness. They know cost alone doesn't tell the whole story. Innovation speed, quality control, and supply chain reliability are just as critical. This commitment allows GE to respond quickly to market changes and reduce risks associated with long-distance supply chains. Local manufacturing also boosts collaboration between teams, leading to faster innovation cycles. GE understands that offshore production can introduce hidden costs, such as delays and quality issues, which can outweigh upfront savings. By investing in U.S. facilities, GE is building a more resilient and agile manufacturing network. That's why they're committing big to domestic manufacturing instead of moving offshore. While many companies chase cheaper labor in Mexico or Asia, GE is bucking that trend. They plan to hire 5,000 workers in 2025 to meet production growth and keep supply chains stable. Making products close to market cuts transport costs and delivery times and improves quality oversight. GE also benefits from a local ecosystem of suppliers, training centers, and skilled workers. This investment not only supports their operations, but helps strengthen the U.S. industrial base sustainably. In fact, by investing locally, GE contributes to a robust manufacturing hub that encourages innovation clusters and fosters industry collaboration. Higher energy costs are a challenge, but GE's modernization efforts include adopting energy-efficient technologies to help offset these expenses. This commitment underscores the company's belief that long-term sustainability outweighs short-term savings from relocating abroad. Expanding production means thousands of new jobs. Good news in regions still facing economic challenges. GE's commitment goes beyond hiring. They offer training programs to prepare workers for high-tech manufacturing. This boosts productivity and helps retain talent. Local communities tied to GE plants benefit from economic stability and growth. Keeping jobs reduces social pressures like poverty and migration. It's a clear example of corporate social responsibility in action. GE Healthcare faces about $500 million in annual losses from retaliatory tariffs. Yet, they're investing in domestic manufacturing instead of relocating overseas. Advanced tech, efficient processes, and tight supply chain control help lower long-term costs. Protecting intellectual property and being agile in the market reduces disruption risks. GE's approach is a big-picture strategy balancing cost, reputation, and sustainability. They're facing global trade challenges head-on with smart investments. Keeping high-tech production in the U.S. protects sensitive products like aircraft engines and medical equipment. Less long-distance shipping cuts. Greenhouse gas emissions, supporting environmental goals. Domestic plants can apply stronger environmental standards. These benefits create a competitive advantage as businesses face increasing pressure on security and sustainability. In short, GE's nearly $1 billion investment and 5,000 new jobs highlight that innovation, quality, and responsibility drive today's manufacturing, not just cost-cutting. This is a powerful signal about the future of American industry, one that's worth your attention.
42% of Americans have lost confidence. The Dow Jones is facing its worst April since the Great Depression, and working families are beginning to ask, what has really happened to the world's leading economy? Markets collapse. Citizens lose everything by the end of April. All three major U.S. stock indices plunged. S&P 500 down 2.5%, NASDAQ dropped 2.5%, and Dow Jones fell 2.48%. The shock was so severe that the Wall Street Journal ran the headline, "Worst since the Great Depression." But this isn't just numbers. For millions of Americans, this is their retirement vanishing. Families depending on dividends, 401ks, or short-term investments suddenly had nothing to fall back on. Interest rates are surging. Prices are climbing. A simple lunch now costs more than a full day's minimum wage. Manual workers, delivery drivers, school teachers are watching their savings disappear before they can react. The big question is, who will rescue them from this freefall when economic stabilization policies are still under discussion? Policies miss the people. Trust in politics crumbles. According to a Rasmussen poll, a traditionally right-leaning source, Democrats lead Republicans by 4 percentage points. This isn't just a shift in polling. It signals a deep fracture in political trust. Why? Many voters say they feel recent policies serve only the elite class, failing to address real hardships like unstable employment, unfair taxation, and lack of transparency in public spending. One glaring example, a plan to cut $4.5 trillion in taxes for the ultra-wealthy, while simultaneously proposing to slash $880 billion from Medicaid, the health program for the poor and elderly. People are asking, when hospitals shut down, when medicine becomes unaffordable, do growth statistics mean anything anymore? Education, immigration, welfare, all under attack. Both Harvard and MIT face the threat of losing $3 billion in federal funding for not complying with policy directives. Letters from the administration demanded control over admissions, firing of faculty with opposing views, and elimination of diversity programs. Simultaneously, over 1 million immigrants were deported, many without proper legal process. Some were removed from the country without ever seeing a courtroom. The result? Millions of children left without parents, communities torn apart, and fear seeping into daily life. And it doesn't stop there. The Department of Education, though officially abolished, still operates to garnish wages from students who haven't paid off their loans. Recent graduates, barely making ends meet, are being financially strangled, while billionaires legally dodge taxes. Is it fair that a student is pursued for debt while the super rich enjoy loopholes? Data erased, trust broken, a cloudy future. When Harvard was sued, when science was censored, when weather, disease, and climate data were erased from federal systems. Americans began to ask, what is being hidden? A measles outbreak, widespread E. coli. Yet critical information is not reaching the public transparently. Meanwhile, the bond market is in turmoil, yields are spiking, and the probability of a US recession in 2025 is forecast at 90%, according to Apollo Group analysis. Americans today are no longer just worried about gas prices or lunch costs. They're afraid that the entire foundation of their society is starting to crack.
$514 billion. That's how much the U.S. Department of the Treasury was forced to borrow in Q2 2025 to cover the massive gap caused by China's dumping of $1.7 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds. And what's even more alarming? The U.S. dollar lost nearly 9% of its value immediately after that retreat. China's shocking counterstrike. Overnight, what once seemed unthinkable became reality. China didn't just pull out of the U.S. bond market, it did so at lightning speed. Roughly $1.7 trillion in Treasury bonds were dumped in quick succession. This came immediately after the U.S. government ordered banking giants, J.P. Morgan and Bank of America, to withdraw from a $5 billion IPO of a leading Chinese EV battery company. The reason? National security concerns and Beijing's rapid rise in strategic technology. But the price? Too high. In just one quarter, the Treasury Department had to boost its borrowing plan to a record $514 billion, more than 4 times the original forecast. This is no longer a story of two economies. It's a full-fledged financial war. The domino effect, dollar drops, interest rates. Surge. China's sudden exit from the bond market sent U.S. Treasury yields soaring, which in turn drove up borrowing costs across the board. Whether buying a house, a car, or paying tuition, Americans are now paying the highest interest rates in years. And the impact? Inflation hit 3.4% in Q1 2025, up 1.2 percentage points from the previous quarter. Rising energy and food prices are eroding the earnings of millions of households, especially low and middle-income families. Consumer confidence plunged to its lowest level since 1952, a glaring sign that fear is spreading about America's economic future. Global investors flee. It wasn't just China. Japan, Germany, and Saudi Arabia also began unloading U.S. bonds simultaneously. In total, $317 billion in U.S. assets were pulled out in just Q1, marking the largest dump since 2016. Meanwhile, Asian IPOs in the U.S. took a nosedive. The percentage of Asian firms choosing to list in the U.S. dropped from 75% to just 28% over the past 3 years. This doesn't only affect foreign firms. It undermines the global appeal of America's capital markets. At the same time, the U.S. Congress ordered giant investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard to divest $812 billion from over 220 Chinese companies, fueling a growing sense of financial instability. China and BRICS restructure the global financial system. As the U.S. uses financial tools to exert pressure, China isn't sitting idle. Beijing has accelerated its de-dollarization strategy through several bold moves, reducing its U.S. bond holdings to $759 billion, the lowest in 9 years. Boosting its gold reserves to 2,292 tons, equivalent to 6.5% of its total FX reserves. Investing more in BRICS internal bonds and yuan-denominated assets. But that's not all. China announced it would launch its own national credit rating system by 2026, aimed at breaking away from Western agencies like Moody's and Fitch. Simultaneously, the BRICS alliance is expanding its payment system, BRICS Pay, enabling cross-border trade in local currencies. In just Q1 2025, it processed $56.4 billion in transactions, with nearly half conducted. Will the U.S. revise its policies? Will it dial back financial weaponization to keep allies close? Or will it double down, while the rest of the world quietly shifts toward a new financial order where the dollar is no longer central? The answer won't come from fiery speeches. It will be revealed through real policies, interest rate decisions, investment rules, and how America handles its strategic partners. Because every passing minute, every signal sent, is another dollar, another job, another American savings account being wagered in this unprecedented financial conflict.